Thank you for coming. My name is Anita Bedell. I'm the Executive Director of Illinois Church Action on Alcohol and Addiction Problems. We have a slumping economy in Illinois, matched with legislators who are eager for projects for their districts, and this is a dangerous mix for gambling expansion. For years, the legislature has advanced gambling as a revenue source while ignoring the cost to taxpayers. Currently, there are several legislative bills that have been introduced to put gambling on the Internet for the lottery and also for horse racing. They also have a bill for to legalize video poker machines in bars, restaurants, clubs, and truck stops. And we believe that making gambling more accessible and available, especially 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is a massive expansion of gambling that will impact individuals and families statewide. We are encouraged that Governor Quinn's remarks a few weeks ago said that he doesn't think that you can gamble your way to prosperity. And with just 6 weeks left in the spring legislative session, this is the time when politicians cut backroom deals on gambling. And we're asking legislators to follow the governor's lead and to look for other ways to balance the budget. And we've invited two speakers with us today. The first one is Professor John Kindt. He's from the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. He's a leading authority on Internet gambling, and he's the editor of a newly published series entitled U.S. International Gambling Report. Dr. Kindt?
Thank you, Ms. Bedell, and thanks for all the good work that you do in informing the public and bringing these issues to the attention of decision makers across the state of Illinois. We're looking at a proposed tax increase of 50% in the state income tax, but the taxes have been going down on the casinos for years. So I don't understand, and my colleagues don't understand, why we've recommended for years that the taxes go up on the gambling industry. That's a quick way to raise revenue, instead of raising taxes on the public. Governor Quinn is absolutely right. You can't gamble your way to prosperity. We've been saying this academically for 20 years. I'm wearing my little red tie today to advertise one of our, or I should say, to emphasize one of our new publications. It's the U.S. International Gambling Report, and it concurs with the governor 100% on this particular issue, that you can't gamble your way to prosperity. I should add that the authors and editors receive no financial returns from this. All of that is pre-designated to 501c3 charity, and many of my colleagues, including myself, don't accept honorarium or consultant fees for speaking on these issues. We do this purely as an academic exercise in the public interest and to help inform the public. So he's right. Here we have the red report on gambling. It's the red flag report on gambling. It says that you can't gamble your way to prosperity. And internet gambling, or any type of backdoor way of getting into internet gambling, which is what is being proposed right here in Springfield in various types of legislation, is an anathema to good public policy and the public health, safety, and welfare. I'm also would like to point out, oh, wait a minute. We even have another volume that says exactly the same thing. You can't gamble your way to prosperity. And this volume is dedicated in part to former U.S. Senator Paul Simon, who sponsored the federal National Gambling Impact Study Commission, which called for a moratorium, a prohibition on the expansion of any type of gambling anywhere in the United States. Why? Because you can't gamble your way to prosperity. It just makes everything else worse, and it cannibalizes the consumer economy. And I would point to 2005, when I and other colleagues testified before the House Administration Committee here, and that committee voted 8-1 for House Bill 1920, which was known affectionately as the Senator Paul Simon Memorial Bill, which called for wiping the slate clean and getting rid of the casino gambling in Illinois. And that bill passed the House by a vote of 67-42. If you look at it straight on the economic facts and the good public health, safety, and welfare types of issues, gambling is lose-lose for the public. It's lose-lose for the taxpayers. and it creates enormous social costs. I would also point out that one of the books is dedicated in part to U.S. Senator Dick Durbin, who gets it, to Congressman Tim Johnson from the University of Illinois area, who gets it, to now President Barack Obama. And this is a bipartisan dedication to people who have looked at these types of issues and have at least made initial statements indicating that gambling is lose-lose for the economy. The one point I'd also point out is that over the last 20 years, gambling interests have literally taken $20 billion out of the state of Illinois, which has lost consumer spending of $60 billion. The sales tax revenues on that alone would almost compensate entirely for all the losses in taxes that the state has had. I would also point out that the license fees, when these were originally granted, were $25,000 apiece. Well, testimony right here in the Capitol says that each one of these casino licenses is worth $500 million. That's a $5 billion loss right off the bat, a giveaway to the gambling industry. That leaves the state. We never see it again. We lose the consumer spending on that. We lose the multiplier effect. We lose the sales tax revenues of a consumer economy. So, number one, don't put gambling on the internet. Number two, if you're going to tax anything, tax the casinos. Quit reducing the tax rates on the casinos and other gambling interests, and as promoted by special interest groups. Third, raise the license fees. And fourth, if they don't agree to this, do what Omaha, Nebraska did. They bulldozed down their racetracks. They didn't build casinos. They built and transformed them into community colleges, an extension of the University of Nebraska at Omaha in this particular instance, plus a high-tech office park. Now, you're either going to build for the future or you're going to keep going with gambling and collapsing your economy. Oh, and by the way, we even have a third volume that says the same thing, Governor. You're right. You can't gamble your way to prosperity. And this one's dedicated to Republican Senator Richard Lugar, who helped sponsor, with Senator Paul Simon, the National Gambling Impact Study Commission Act, which says you can't gamble your way to prosperity. Eliminate the gambling, reduce the gambling, roll back the gambling, tax the gambling. Don't expand gambling in any way, shape, or form. It's lose-lose for everybody except the gambling interests.
Thank you. We also have a chart to your right which has some of the highlights in the publications that Professor Kindt has, and we also have a chart of campaign contributions to legislators. Years ago, former Illinois Senator and U.S. Senator Peter Fitzgerald said the reason that we have so many gambling bills isn't because it's so good for Illinois or good for the economy, but they get a lot of campaign contributions. So this shows you that from 2007 to the first half of 2008, over $1.7 million was given to state legislators, and these are only preliminary results. Professor Kent Redfield from the University of Illinois in Springfield is working on the last half of 2008, and these will be available shortly. Our next speaker is Dr. Miriam Mustafi. She's the spokesperson for the Islamic Society of Greater Springfield, and she also serves as a political activist on issues that impact faith communities in Illinois. Miriam?
Thank you very much, Anita. And Dr. Kindt addressed the economic impact and some of the myths concerning gambling in how it can affect the economic situation in our state. What I'd like to focus on for the next few minutes is looking at the individual and the societal impact of gambling, specifically looking at internet gambling, if I can. First thing I'd like to start off with is that we have become a culture that is enticed by immediate gratification. We want our pleasures immediately. We want cures for diseases immediately. We want food immediately. We want all of these gratifications to be addressed immediately. We do not look for long-term gratification. We oftentimes, as human beings, have been enticed by the media, by commercials, by various societal impacts. We find that we have grown to become a culture that truly loves immediate gratification. Gambling, especially internet gambling, plays into this. And it does it in a number of ways, and it can be very insidious. If you look at some of the games that are on the internet, initially you do not have to place any real bets, but you can play some of these casino games. You can play blackjack. You can play all kinds of games on the internet for free, as long as you have access to a computer. Many homes now, in fact, most of the homes in Illinois, have at least one computer that is connected to an internet, so that individuals get on there initially playing internet games that seem to be harmless. Well, what those games are actually doing is they are teaching individuals how to play on the internet so that they gain the skills they believe to become winners. And the more often they win on these sites, the more they create in their own minds this illusion that they are a good gambler. They really know how to play poker. And that if they wanted to, they could just place a few dollars on a few bets here and there, and they could go on to the internet sites and probably do pretty well. Well, one of the things that we know is that gambling addicts is what eventually evolves for many of these individuals who may have impulse control problems or develop impulse control problems along the way. We have, first of all, the availability of this site. We have the training and preparation for people to become involved. We already have a psychosocial model that's being developed that affirms that the individual's belief that they are going to be good at gambling and that they might want to just take the next step and become a professional gambler. In other words, placing real wages. In the winning phase, which is one of the first phases of gambling addiction, the individual does win. These games are set up to entice individuals to begin winning immediately. And over a period of time, that reinforces the psyche of the individual that they are going to be able to win and win big. So the individual then continues, and when the programmed computer games that are now wagered games begin to shift the odds in favor of the sites that are making money off of this, then they begin to lose. But they have already been conditioned or programmed to believe that they are an effective gambler and that they have the skills to win. They just need to put a few more dollars down and they're going to win. What happens then is they put more and more and more money in. And every so often, it pays off. You have intermittent reinforcements, which are the most dangerous of all. So these individuals are intermittently get reinforced that they can win. So they continue to wager. Unfortunately, that intermittent kind of reward leads to more and more compulsive behaviors in terms of larger and larger bets in the hopes of winning even more. Eventually, the individual loses so much that they enter the desperation phase. which is the third phase. We had the winning phase, the losing phase, and now we have the desperation phase, where the individuals are trying to climb out of the hole that they have created, the financial hole, this abyss that they'll never be able to get out of. And so they are trying to figure out now not only how can they continue this behavior because they're still programmed to want to gamble, but how are they going to keep this, what has been a secret, still a secret from other members of their family? How are they going to pay off the debts that have amounted because right from the armchair of their home or their computer laptop, they can sit there and wager without ever having to drive to a casino. They don't have to worry about the increase in gas. They don't have to worry about changing into other clothes. They can sit in their pajamas and play all night if they want to. And they have developed a new social network. These individuals now are trying to come up with ways of figuring out how to keep from losing their homes. Oftentimes, family members are unaware until the desperation phase that the individual has wagered their life savings. These are pathological gamblers who now seek to continue their habit as well as to try to pay off other debts by stealing from family members, from embezzling at work. There can be all kinds of criminal activity that begins to take place because they're trying to sustain a habit and yet pay off this habit as well. So what we find is that it impacts not only the individual, but it in fact impacts the entire family unit, whether it's an extended family unit or just the husband and wife and children. They lose their homes. They frequently lose their jobs as well, which provides even greater financial loss and instability to the family, which oftentimes leads to divorce. And one of the reasons they lose their job is because they may have access to computers at work. And as long as there's a computer in front of them, there's a temptation to gamble. So they begin gambling even at work. Well, that means that they are not only guilty of doing something, if they're a state employee, for instance, it could be something that could be totally illegal for them to be doing from their work site. It could be against company policy if it's a private company. They're probably losing productivity. They're going to jeopardize their jobs in many different ways. Not only this, but what we find among people that are pathological gamblers is that they are oftentimes individuals that develop, if they don't already have, a co-addiction. In order to numb the pain that they're experiencing, they may turn to gambling as a high, or they may turn to, if they are gambling and losing, they may be drinking at the same time they're gambling, which again reduces their inhibition and their impulse control. So you may see someone who becomes also have an addiction to alcohol and substance abuse. In addition, we find that there are some studies going on now to show that there are also compulsions towards sexually explicit content on the internet. So there are multiple addictions that develop as a result of one behavior. William White wrote a book a number of years ago called The Culture of Addiction. And what he says is that no matter what form of addiction it is, the individuals have to change their complete lifestyle. They have to remove themselves from the location in which this behavior takes place. They have to replace their social network. They have to change their daily routines. For instance, if it's an alcoholic and they are used to picking up a bottle of wine or another form of alcohol on the way home, they need to change their driving patterns so that they don't drive by that same liquor store every night on the way home from work if they still have a job. Well, what do you do when it's a gambling addiction? You may change your home, but not out of choice. You may lose your home. But if you have access to a computer, you still have the same environment. There is a culture that develops around this gambling addiction and is very difficult to replace. They may replace their social structure, which is their family, with others which are engaged in addictive behaviors as well, because they lose their families as a result of divorce, of child neglect and abuse. We see also child neglect and abuse and spousal abuse also increase with the increase of gambling addictions and other addictions as well. So I would like to say that I think that the economic impact that was spoken of a few minutes ago will, if you look into that material, it will show you the social impact in terms of dollars and cents, what it's going to cost to try to bring people back from gambling addiction. Why not, as Dr. Kindt said, invest that money instead in ways in which we can grow our society rather than destroy our society? Thank you very much.
Thank you. As Dr. Mustafi said, you can play internet gambling without betting. They have internet lottery games. They have horse racing on the internet that will give not only adults but also children. In both of these areas, you can gamble at 18 on horse racing and on the lottery. So that's another concern we have is for our youth. And now we would open up to questions from the press.
Give you something to hide behind here, Anita,
Okay.
in case the questions are too tough.
What makes you think lawmakers here are going to buy into anything you've said today?
Well, Senator Cullerton has said on many occasions that he wants internet lottery to pay for the capital construction plan, and they are working on that. There's also the Senate Bill 1298 for account deposit wagering, which legalizes horse racing on the internet, passed the Senate 2 weeks ago. It's in the House now, so that's why we're concerned.
Right, but what makes you think they're going to see your side of it and say, you know, this really is a bad idea, it's bad for everybody, Ms. Bedell and her experts are right?
Well, that's why are continuing to give information to legislators. We have phone calls going into legislators from their districts to let them know that the people do not want this type of gambling in Illinois. Go ahead, sure.
If I may, one of the things that I would suggest is that part of our job is contacting each individual legislator and talking with them about their own personal histories in terms of having them identify us, members of their own families that have had compulsive behavioral problems, whether it be addiction or alcohol or whatever, and beginning to show them, if they've got kids in college, do they really want their kids in college to run up these huge, huge debts because their children are going to be exposed? I don't think some of them realize the immediate impact on their own family units and their own communities. And I think that's part of our responsibility, is meeting with each of them and being able to show them that this is something that could have a very negative impact very close to home.
What kind of progress have you made? What kind of response have you gotten from the lawmakers that you've impressed upon?
That's part of our job now, is to begin doing that, because I think we're at a point now where we have to start addressing each one and bringing the message home. I think we've done it very well on a large scale, on a societal scale, but it's a little bit removed. And I think from my experience in working with legislators, when you bring it home to them, to their immediate families, to their immediate communities, you find that they begin to listen and they begin to think at things differently. And so I really have confidence that that's what we need to do and can do and should be very active in doing.
If I can ask something? I remember a joint Senate-House hearing, I think it was about 1994, I believe Ms. Bedell was there, and the legislators there were simply embarrassed by the facts. The academic studies are overwhelmingly negative on gambling. So why is there the National Gambling Impact Study Commission said a prohibition, a moratorium on the expansion of gambling anywhere in the United States, sponsored by former U.S. Senator Paul Simon. The new Red on Gambling report says prohibit expansion of gambling and roll back pre-existing gambling, which, by the way, reinforces what the U.S. Federal Commission said 10 years ago. So the facts are there, and the cost-benefit ratios, as have been addressed in sworn testimony before Congress, are at least $3 for every $1 in benefits. So when you have this overwhelming amount of evidence that says that gambling is lose-lose for the state, it's lose-lose for the country, why is it being expanded? I think that's a great question. And that's a question that the public should look at very closely and say, and what's going on here in Illinois? What kind of a reputation does this state have right now with regard to Fortune 500 companies? We did a study back in 1994 published that said that companies avoid high gambling areas just like they avoid high crime areas. We predicted much of these economic problems and budget shortfalls 15, 20 years ago. Well, they're here. And instead of learning the lesson and rolling back the gambling, we're hearing these proposals to keep going down the same path and throw gambling is like gasoline on the recessionary fires. Things are just going to get worse and worse and worse. So I remember at this 1994 hearing, Professor Henry Lessier from Illinois State University simply, and I thought he was very bold, he just looked straight at the legislators and said, you should be ashamed. You should really be ashamed of what you're doing to the state of Illinois.
Do you think the money that, are you saying that the money that's being spent on gambling is not being spent elsewhere in the economy?
Absolutely. If you're dumping money into these slot machines don't make jobs. They hurt job creation. Every slot machine takes about one job per year out of the consumer economy. If you're spending money in these, dumping money into these slot machines, you're not spending money on cars, refrigerators, computers, education. In studies that shows that around these slot machine areas, we have people spending even 10% less on food, 25% less on clothing, 37% raiding their bank accounts in order to gamble. This is a terrible societal problem. And when you think about it, the public needs to think about illegal drugs. And I hear this in congressional statements all the time. Gambling and legalized gambling addiction is like drug addiction. People need to reinform themselves on these issues and re-educate themselves that this is like drug addiction. And why are we bringing in more and more opportunities to increase addicted gamblers and problem gamblers who create all of these taxpayer social costs, declines in the quality of life? We can get, in congressional testimony again, the federal government gets this. The federal officials, Senator Dick Durbin gets this, Representative Tim Johnson gets it, former Senator Paul Simon, Senator Richard Lugar. The federal's legislation has been moving. And with regard to internet gambling, I actually testified in 2006 on behalf of the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act, which passed the Congress because of all the things that you've heard here today. Internet gambling is the very worst form of gambling because it puts electronic gambling at every school desk, at every work desk, and in every living room. And you will find companies that say, they'll argue, well, we can create jobs with this. Well, you can create jobs if you legalize illegal drugs. You can create tax revenues if you legalize illegal drugs. You can give money to charity if you legalize illegal drugs. But the costs are overwhelming. So it's simply a question of re-educating the public, and the public has to say, we want to get back on track. We want a strong consumer economy. We want lower taxes, not higher taxes. And if you're going to tax anything, tax the gambling. But the best thing to do is to do what Omaha, Nebraska did, and that is to simply change these gambling venues into educational venues, which they've done. And it works, and it's beautiful.
Last year, the state took in $1.3 billion in tax revenue from the casinos. State's facing a $12 billion hole.
I would say that the state lost $4 billion in social costs and other costs, because all of the evidence shows that the costs are at least $3 for every $1 in benefits. If you say you're bringing in $1.3 billion in tax revenues, I believe you. But the social costs are at least 3 times that. And the lost consumer spending is enormous. The lost sales tax revenues, enormous. We're losing. And when you start losing the economy, you want to go back to the basics. You don't want to keep going down the wrong path. It's time to turn around.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. I would like to make one other mention, and that is May 21st, the first Muslim lobby day is going to be held here in the Capitol. And that will be the first time that we've had a Muslim lobby day. And one of the issues that we will be addressing is the issue of gambling, among other things. So we plan on meeting with legislators at that time in very large numbers.